Tonight our speaker is N. Scott Momaday, poet, painter, storyteller, and as I know from listening to him speak with our students yesterday, sympathetic and illuminating teacher. And thus it is for me a privilege to introduce our speaker, N. Scott Momaday.
I was born in Oklahoma, southwestern Oklahoma. I didn't live there long. My parents moved to Arizona and New Mexico when I was very young. But I was born in Oklahoma, and I went there many times when I was growing up to visit my Kiowa ancestors. And this poem is a kind of evocation of the southern plains landscape with storms descending upon it. PLAINVIEW 1. There in the hollow of the hills I see 11 magpies stand away from me. Low light upon the rim, a wind informs this distance with a gathering of storms, and drifts in silver crescents on the grass, configurations that appear and pass. There falls a final shadow on the glare, a stillness on the dark, erratic air. I do not hear the longer wind that lows among the magpies. Silences disclose until no rhythm of unrest remains. No rhythms of unrest remain. 11 magpies standing in the plain. They are illusion. Wind and rain revolve, and they recede in darkness and dissolve. I like that poem because it reminds me of some of the times I've spent in the southern plains when storms descend. My mother, who still lives in her 80s in New Mexico, refuses to go into Oklahoma in the springtime because of the weather. And I remember her taking me as a child from the house, the homestead on Rainy Mountain Creek, out of the house and into the storm cellar, which was just off the kitchen porch, and we would stay in there sometimes at night with all kinds of weather going on outside. And that was a strange place. It was very grave-like. The soil was of a special smell and color, and she would take me in there, and I would sleep on the bench while she read by the light of a kerosene lamp. Wonderful memory. Across the road, my grandparents' house was on a hill south of Mountain View, Oklahoma, on Rainy Mountain Creek, and there was a highway that passed through, Mountain View, and then went on through Anadarko to Oklahoma City. And in my day, when I was quite young, I loved to go to sleep at night and hear the whine of the tires on that road. I don't know why I did, but it gave me a sense of security. And across that road was the house of a family, and you could see the house, and you could see people moving in the yard. Well, in that house there lived a woman whose name was Millie Durgan. She was a Kiowa captive, as was my great-grandmother. The Kiowas were very good at stealing people, as well as horses. And Millie Durgan lived across the road from my grandparents' house. And she was a wonderful woman. My mother knew her, and she was generous of spirit, she was kind, she was gentle, she was intelligent. And so she was a very interesting woman to know. And the last time I drove through drove along that road, and beside, between the two houses, there was a plaque. This was about 2 years ago. There was a plaque on the side of the road commemorating Millie Durgan. Here lived Millie Durgan, a Kiowa captive. And the dates, I don't remember what they were. I wrote this poem called PLAINVIEW 4. Johnny cake and venison and sassafras tea. Johnny cake and venison and sassafras tea. Just there, another house. Poor Buffalo's house. The paint is gone from the wood and the people are gone from the house. Once upon a time, I saw the people there in the windows and the yard. An old woman lived there, one of whose girlhood I have often dreamed. She was Millie Durgan of Texas, and a Kiowa captive. Aye, Millie Durgan, you've gone now to be away in the country and captivity. Aye, Millie Durgan, you've gone from your home away to the prairie, forever to roam. The warm wind lies about the house in March, and there is a music in it, as I have heard, an American song. And its ladies to the center, and its gents around the row, and will rally round the canebrake and shoot the buffalo. Those two, I like the poem because it not only commemorates Millie Durgan, who was a wonderful woman in the unrecorded lore of the West, but because there are these two American songs in it, which I like very much. The Texian Boys and Shoot the Buffalo. My Indian name is Tsoai Tali. It means rock tree boy. And I tell you how I came to be given that name. There is a place in Wyoming called Devil's Tower. Some of you know of it. Some of you have been there. It's a monolith that rises out of the ground on the apron of the Black Hills, and you have to see it to believe it. It is one of the great features in the landscape, and it is sacred in Kiowa tradition. The Kiowas, the earliest evidence we have of my people, the Kiowas, is in what is now the western end of Montana, near the headwaters of the Yellowstone River. About 500 years ago, the Kiowas lived there. And for reasons that we don't know, they moved down out of the mountains of that region and entered upon the Great Plains. And they became a plains people, which is a remarkable revolution if you stop to think about it. They began their migration there at the headwaters of the Yellowstone. They came down upon the northern Great Plains. They lived with the Crow people for a time, and then they continued their migration south and eastward down the rain shadow of the Rocky Mountains, spending time in Nebraska and Colorado and Kansas, and then finally coming into what is now Oklahoma. And in the Wichita Mountains of southwestern Oklahoma, their migration ended. And Rainy Mountain, which is there, is the hub of their activity in the 19th century. They came there, they stopped, they fought the Comanches, and then formed an alliance with the Comanches, and the two tribes lived their golden age from about 1750 to 1850 there in the southern plains, resisting every attempt on the part of intruders to take their land. Well, I identify very closely, of course, with my Kiowa ancestors. I love that part of the country. The plains means a great deal to me. When I was an infant, living in the Depression, my family was very poor and looking for work. My parents took me from my grandmother's house in, my grandfather had died just the year before. My grandmother kept the house on Rainy Mountain Creek, and there we lived. From there, when I was a year old, my parents took me to Devil's Tower, Wyoming. Why? I don't know, except that it was a very sacred place. And then they brought me back after a week or so. I don't have an actual recollection of that time, though I have been back to that place many times. Brought me back, and soon after, an old man of the tribe, a man named Pol Ho, Old Wolf, came to visit, and he took me in his hands, and he began to tell the stories of the Kiowas, you know, of all the good things and all of the bad things that had happened to them. And as he spoke, all of the other voices fell away. His was the one that held sway. And at the end of his storytelling, he looked down at me and he said, "Now you are Soai Tali, Rock Tree Boy." The name was given to me to commemorate my having been taken to that sacred place in Kiowa tradition. Many years later, I wrote a poem about my name, and it is called The Delight Song of Soai Tali. I am a feather on the bright sky. I am the horse that runs in the plain. I am the fish that rolls shining in the water. I am the shadow that follows a child. I am the evening light, the luster of meadows. I am an eagle playing with the wind. I am a cluster of bright beads. I am the farthest star. I am the cold of the dawn. I am the roaring of the rain. I am the glitter on the crust of the snow. I am the long track of the moon in a lake. I am a flame of 4 colors. I am a deer standing away in the dusk. I am a field of sumac and the pomme blanche. I am an angle of geese in the winter sky. I am the hunger of a young wolf. I am the whole a dream of these things. You see, I am alive. I am alive. I stand in good relation to the earth. I stand in good relation to the gods. I stand in good relation to all that is beautiful. I stand in good relation to the daughter of Tsentainte. You see, I am alive. I am alive. It is one of my great glories. I have written extensively about Billy the Kid. I'm one of the world's great authorities on Billy the Kid. I say that in all modesty. Billy, not a whole lot is known about Billy the Kid. He's a legendary figure, and biographical information is scarce. But he and I were great friends. You know, when I was a child growing up in New Mexico, say about the age of 8 or 9, I learned about Billy the Kid. Every child who grows up in New Mexico learns about Billy the Kid. He's a kind of comfortable presence in that landscape. comfortable is, that's, we don't know. I don't know if that's the right word. But everybody there knows about him. And when I was 12 years old, I was given a horse. And like Alexander the Great was given a horse when he was 12 years old. I don't mean to compare myself to Alexander. There the comparison stops. But it is true that at the same age we were given horses, and they were legendary horses. Alexander was given the horse Bucephalus, which he rode on his campaigns, and when the horse was too old to ride on the campaigns, Alexander led the horse, so that the smell of conquest and glory the horse might breathe into its nostrils even in old age. I like that. I had a horse named Pecos, and was a wonderful thing for me. One of the great glories in my life was Pecos, a strawberry roan quarter horse. I would like to read you the section on Billy the Kid. It's called The Strange and True Story of My Life with Billy the Kid, and it is in 21 parts, one for each year of Billy the Kid's life. And some of these are in poetry, some of them are in prose. Let me read you the first one just to give you a sense of what this section is. The first section, the first piece in this section is called "Riding is an Exercise of the Mind." One autumn morning in 1946, I woke up at Jemez Pueblo. I had arrived there in the middle of the night and gone to sleep. I had no idea of the landscape, no sense of where in the world I was. Now, in the bright New Mexican morning, I began to look around and settle in. I had found the last, best home of my childhood. When my parents and I moved to Jemez, I was 12 years old. The world was a different place then, and Jemez was the most exotic corner within it. The village, the valley, the canyons, and the mountains had been there from the beginning of time, waiting for me, so it seemed. Marco Polo in the court of Kublai Khan had nothing on me. I was embarked upon the greatest adventure of all. I had come to the place of my growing up. The landscape was full of mystery and of life. The autumn was in full bloom. The sun cast a golden light upon the adobe walls and the cornfields. It set fire to the leaves of willows and cottonwoods along the river, and a fresh, cold wind ran down from the canyons and carried the good scents of pine and cedar smoke, of bread baking in the beehive ovens, and of rain in the mountains. There were horses in the plain and angles of geese in the sky. One November, on the feast of San Diego, the Jemez took on all the colors of a Renaissance fair. I lived on the southwest corner of the village, on the wagon road to San Isidro. I looked southward into the plain. There, a caravan of covered wagons reached as far as the eye could see. These were the Navajos coming in from Torreon. I had never seen such a pageant. It was as if that whole proud people, the Diné, had been concentrated into one endless migration. There was a great dignity to them, even in revelry. They sat all in the wagons and on horseback, going easily with laughter and singing their riding songs. And when they set up camp in the streets, they were perfectly at home. Their dogs about them, they made coffee and fried bread and roasted mutton on their open fires. Gradually and without effort, I entered into the motion of life there. In the winter dusk, I heard coyotes barking away by the river, the sound of the drums in the kiva, and the voice of the village crier ringing at the rooftops. And on summer nights of the full moon, I saw old men in their ceremonial garb running after witches. And sometimes I saw the witches themselves in the forms of bats and cats and owls on fence posts. I came to know the land by going out upon it in all seasons, getting into it until it became the very element in which I lived my daily life. I had a horse named Pecos, a fleet-footed roan gelding, which was my great glory for a time. Pecos could outrun all the other horses in the village, and he wanted always to prove it. We too came to a good understanding of each other, I believe. I did a lot of riding in those days, and I got to be very good at it. My Kiowa ancestors, who were centaurs, should have been proud of me. Riding is an exercise of the mind. I dreamed a good deal on the back of my horse, going out into the hills alone. Desperados were everywhere in the brush. More than once I came upon roving bands of hostile Indians and had, on the spur of the moment, to put down an uprising. Now and then I found a wagon train in trouble. And always, among the settlers, there was a lovely young girl from Charleston or Philadelphia who needed, simply and more than anything else in the world, to be saved. I saved her. After a time, Billy the Kid was with me on most of those adventures. He rode on my right side and a couple of steps behind. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, for he bore watching. We got on well together in the main, and he was a good man to have along in a fight. We had to be careful, you see. We had to be careful of glory-seeking punks. Incredibly, there were those in the world who were foolish enough to oppose us for the sake, merely for the sake of gaining a certain reputation. When it came time for me to leave home and venture out into the wider world, I sold my horse to an old gentleman at Vallecitos. I like to think that Pecos went on with our games long afterward, that in his old age he listened for the sound of bugles and of gunfire, and for the pitiful weeping of young ladies in distress, and that he heard them as surely as I do now. This is number 15 of the 21 pieces. One day, Billy and I were riding down from the high country south of the Hondo Valley. It was getting on towards evening, and the light was failing fast. Far below, we could see the pale geometry of a village Arroyo Corvo, as I recall, and we made straight for the cantina there. Night came on as we stood without talking at the bar. An hour passed and another. Then, "Move over, friend." A thick-bearded man stepped between us, facing Billy. Quite apart from the fact that he was obviously drunk, there was something repulsive in his manner. You could see at once that there was no steel in him, and not a glimmer of the doom that was about to descend upon him. I caught my breath. Over the intruder's shoulder, I saw Billy raise his eyes slowly. He said nothing, nor did he give so much as an inch, but for a moment, his eyes lay upon the man like a shroud, and he returned to his drink. The man withered away. I had never seen Billy fix a man in his gaze before. For years now I have tried to understand what it was that I saw in his eyes at that moment. There are times when it seems surely to have been something like sorrow, faintest sadness. But at other times, I realized that there was nothing. Nothing at all. That Billy was the only man I have ever known in whose eyes there was no expression whatever. The shield story that I would like to read you first is called The Shield That Came Back. Turning around, tested his son Yellowgrass. "You must kill 30 scissortails and make me a fan of their feathers." "Must I make the whole fan?" asked Yellowgrass. "Must I do the beadwork too?" Yellowgrass had never made a fan. Yes, you must do the beadwork too. Yes, blue and black and white and orange. "Those are the colors of your shield," said Yellowgrass. Yellowgrass fretted over the making of his father's fan. But when at last it was finished, it was a fine, beautiful thing. The feathers tightly bunched and closely matched, their sheen like a rainbow. Yet they could be spread wide in a disk like a shield, and the handle was beaded tightly. The blue and black and white and orange beads glittered in every light, and there was a long bunch of doeskin fringes at the handle's end. When turning around saw the fan, he said nothing, but he was full of pride and admiration. Then he went off on a raiding expedition to the Pueblo country, and there he was killed. After that, Yellowgrass went among the Pueblos and redeemed his father's shield, but the fan could not be found. When he was an old man, Yellowgrass said to his grandson, Handsome Horse, You see, the shield was more powerful than the fan, for the shield came back, and the fan did not. Some things, if they are powerful, Remember that. Remember that for us in this camp, that is how to think of the world. The shield belonged to Longfeet. The whole story of the shield is unknown. This is what is known. Longfeet was a dreamer. He lived alone away from the camps. He was a hermit, and he kept among the dogs. He was thought to be very wise, and he was admired for his independence. He never married, nor did he have children. His shield, which was old and powerful, was found near Rainy Mountain, where Longfeet died of old age. 4 dogs were looking after it. They had to be spoken to in a sorrowful, respectful way. Dogs are very important in Kiowa tradition. We know that the Kiowas 500-600 years ago lived in the north, what is now western Montana, near the headwaters of the Yellowstone River. Before that, they must have been farther north. They must have come down along the Canadian Rockies. They must have come down from Alaska. They must have crossed the Bering Strait maybe 20,000, 30,000 years ago. What we know about those first Americans, those people that were coming into the continent across the Bering Strait, is that they had dogs. They were beasts of burden. They were pulling travois. So the dog is primordial. In the 19th century, when the Kiowas came upon the southern plains and they encountered the Comanche people, 10 Bears, the great Comanche chief, said to the Kiowas, "Ha! We know about you. We know when you were coming down with sleds and dogs." And so I have this great respect for dogs, and I love stories in the oral tradition which have to do with dogs. There is one in The Way to Rainy Mountain, a story about a man who is saved by a dog. It's a very simple story. It goes like this. There was a man who had been thrown away, and he was wandering out upon the plains. He had a bow and arrows, but he was alone. He expended all of his arrows hunting food, and finally he had no arrows left, and he was helpless. And he wondered, what would become of him. Whereupon a dog approached him and said to him, this was a long time ago when dogs could talk. The dog said, "Hey, you are in great trouble. There are enemies all around. You are completely surrounded." And the man said, "Thanks a lot. I knew that. But what must I do? I'm helpless. I've expended all of my arrows. I have nothing with which to defend myself. I'm hungry." Looks like the end, doesn't it? And the dog said, wait a minute. I could save you." The man became suddenly very attentive, and he said, "What? You could save me?" The dog said, "Oh, sure, yeah, I could save you." And the man said, "Well, for God's sake, if you can save me, please do." And the dog said, "Wait a minute, hold on. You know how dogs are. Wait a minute. I have puppies. They are little, they are hungry, they are cold. If you will take care of my puppies, I will save you." So the bargain was struck. The man agreed readily, and the story ends that the dog led the man round and round, and they came to safety. This is a wonderful story. Wonderful story. Actually more than that. Several years ago, I was invited to speak to a group of 6th graders at the Hebrew Academy of San Francisco. And so I was wondering what I might say to them. And I thought of the stories in The Way to Rainy Mountain, and particularly this story, because, you know, what 6th grader can resist a story about a man who is saved by a talking dog? You know, that's pretty wonderful in itself. And so I looked out over the class and I said, this happened a long time ago when dogs could talk. And a little girl in the front row looked up at me and she said, "Those were the days." Completely ruined the story. I've often thought about that little girl, you know, and wondered what has become of her, if she was allowed to grow up. I've thought about her, you know, with great malice, and I suspect she's an actress somewhere stealing scenes. You know. I have to tell you something. I live in Tucson, and Tucson, as you know, is very hot in the summer. The heat is intense, and people who live there have to deal with the heat, and they have different ways of dealing with it. Almost everyone has 2 kinds of air conditioning. Many people have pools, swimming pools, and I have a swimming pool. And it is not only my way of dealing with the intense heat, but it is a form of exercise. I go out and swim laps, you know. Well, I don't know if you know this, but swimming laps is deadly boring. It is just one of the most boring activities known to man, you know. Now, I don't jog, but I suspect that jogging and swimming laps must be sort of on a level of boredom that is intense, you know. And so I go out and I plunge into the water, but I found a way to deal with the deadly boredom of swimming laps. I compose epitaphs as I swim. Now, I recommend this to you. It's really not bad, you know. You can swim looking down at that black stripe in the water, and you can compose epitaphs. And it is salvation. It's wonderful. So I have collected a number of these epitaphs, and I want to share 1 or 2 of them with you. They are like eating peanuts. Composing epitaphs is a little like eating peanuts. You can't stop once you get started. But I have 2-lap epitaphs, 4-lap epitaphs, 6 laps. And so I have included a couple of them in this collection, and I would like to share them with you, just 2 or 3. Here is one called The Death of Beauty. It's a 2-lapper. And you must bear in mind that I compose these without benefit of paper and pencil and while completely wet. Okay. The Death of Beauty. She died a beauty of repute, her other virtues in dispute. Okay. Here is another 2-lapper, one of my favorites. It's called On Chastity. Here lies a lady sweet and chaste. Here lies the matter, chaste is waste. You see? Not bad. All right. The next poem that I want to read you is called The Great Fillmore Street Buffalo Drive. And I have to preface this poem because it has a kind of, well, it has an interesting history. I wrote this poem some years ago and did not publish it, did not offer it for publication because I wanted simply to hold on to it and to keep it mine. Finally, someone prevailed upon me to have it published, but for a long time it existed in a kind of underground. People knew of it because I would go and I would read it before audiences, you know, and I did not publish it, and it became well known. I'm justly famous for this poem. And you know, after a time people began to say, where do I find it? In which book is this poem published? And I would say, ha! It's not published. You can't find it anywhere. It just exists. And so I share it with you. I have to tell you how it came to be. When I taught at, I taught for several years at Berkeley, and I taught at Stanford. And I lived in San Francisco when I taught at both places. I lived in the Marina, Fillmore and Beach. And when I taught at Stanford, I would drive, you know, up Fillmore. I don't know if you know the city. Some of you do, certainly. You drive up Fillmore, which is this great boulevard, and you come to the top of Pacific Heights, which is the intersection of Fillmore and Broadway. And then you sort of go down and out of the city onto the freeway down the peninsula. So I made this drive twice or three times a week for years. One day, as I was driving up Fillmore Street to the top of Pacific Heights, which is that intersection, Broadway and Fillmore, my imagination went wild. I was looking back through the rearview mirror at this wonderful expanse of the bay. You know, Fillmore Street just goes right down to Marina Green, and there is the bay. And I was driving along, you know, and I thought, my God, what a great place for a buffalo drive. And I kept thinking about that, you know, and I thought, what if one day the good citizens of San Francisco should be awakened by a sound they had never heard before, you know, this bawling, rumbling sound. And they should go out upon their balconies and they should look south, and there on the peninsula should be this great cloud of dust. And this is a remnant of the southern herd, you know, like 5,000, 10,000 animals converging upon the city of San Francisco. The herd comes into the city, knocking over telegraph poles, knocking the corners off buildings, trampling automobiles. They take the line of least resistance, which is Van Ness Avenue. They move through the city like a great wave. You know, they come to the intersection of Van Ness and Broadway, and there they hang a left. They move up Broadway to the top of Pacific Heights, to that intersection of Fillmore and Broadway. And there, on the southwest corner of the intersection, is an old man on an old horse, waving a red chief's blanket. And he diverts all of these animals down Fillmore into the sea. How's that for an act of the imagination? I wrote this poem, which is one of my more famous poems, called The Great Fillmore Street Buffalo Drive. Insinuate the sun through fog upon Pacific heights, upon the man on horseback, upon the herd ascending. There is color and clamor, and there he waves them down, those great humpbacked animals, until their wild grace gone. They lumber and lunge, and blood blisters at their teeth, and their hooves score the street. And among boulders, they settle on the sea. He looks after them, twisted round upon his sorrow, the drape of his flag now full and formal, ceremonial. One bull, animal representation of the sun, he dreams back from the brink to the green refuge of his hunter's heart. It grazes near a canyon wall, along a ribbon of light, among redbud trees, eventually into shadow. Then the hold of his eyes is broken. On the farther rim the grasses flicker and blur. A hawk brushes rain across the dusk. Meadows recede into mountains, and here and there are moons like salmon berries against the glacial face of the sky. I was born at Lawton, Oklahoma in 1934. That makes me 37 as I calculate that. But just there, on the edge of Lawton, Oklahoma, is an old military fort, Fort Sill. It is the principal artillery school in our country, and it was an old Southern Plains fort. And the Kiowas and the Comanches, were well known to Fort Sill, and Fort Sill was well known to them. And there was a man, a Kiowa chief whose name was Setangya, Sitting Bear. Sitting Bear is one of my heroes, if that is the right term. He was a very famous chief, and I'll tell you why. He was crazy, and I like craziness. Setangya was a crazy old man. He was the leader. He was the leader of the Kaitsenko Society, which is the crazy dog society in the Kiowa tribe. That society was composed of 10 men only, the 10 most brave. And each of the Kaitsenko warriors wore a sash around his middle which trailed the ground, and each member carried a sacred arrow. And in times of battle, the Kaitsenko warrior must impale his sash to the ground and stand his ground to the death. The Kaitsenko Society had a song which belonged only to the 10 members of the society. And each member could sing that song, but only in the face of death. So it was the elite military society in the tribe, the last line of resistance. And this old man was the head of that society. There is one photograph of him. At the age of 60, he is photographed at some treaty, Medicine Lodge, I believe it is, and the photograph is from about here up. He is wrinkled. His hair is white and scraggly. It falls down about him. He has a Fu Manchu mustache, terribly wrinkled face. One eye is a slit. We don't know if there's an eye there at all. The other gleams into the camera with something like malice. He has some kind of bandolier over one shoulder which comes down. It looks like a strip of hide with hair on it. And he has a bare hide over his shoulders. And he's wearing a medal, much like the medal that I received yesterday. President Buchanan Peace Medal. Okay. This old man had a favorite son, a son who was killed in Texas on a raid. And when Satangya heard about it, he went to Texas and he gathered up the bones of his son and he carried them around on the back of a horse. He led a horse which bore the bones of his son on its back, and he would say to the people in the evening, people of the camp, "Come, my son is at home tonight. Come and pay your respects." And he placed the bones in a teepee. He was imprisoned. He was captured and imprisoned with two other Kiowa chiefs in connection with the Warren wagon train fight. He was imprisoned at Fort Sill, and you can go and see the place where he was imprisoned. You can see his grave there. But the three chiefs, the three Kiowa chiefs, it was decided had to be removed from Fort Sill and sent to Texas, to a prison in Texas. And so they were shackled, hand and feet, and they were put in the bed of a buckboard. An Army cavalry sergeant was the teamster driving the buckboard along to the railhead. There were two mounted armed guards, cavalry soldiers with rifles on either side of the wagon. So they started off along a road which is now called Sitting Bull Road on the fort. And as they were moving along, Sitting Bear, Satangya, began to sing the song of the Kaitsenko. And when the other chiefs, the two other chiefs, heard him, they were greatly alarmed. And they said, what are you doing? You can't sing that song, that's taboo. Can't do that. And he said to them, "Do you see the cottonwood in the distance by the side of the road?" And there was a cottonwood there. It's no longer there, but people do remember it. "By the time we come to that tree, I will be dead." And he drew a knife, which he had secreted somehow on his being, and he attacked the teamster, stabbed the teamster in the leg. And the two armed guards on either side of the wagon opened fire and shot him dead. His body was removed and sat against the tree. But he was true to his word. He was true to his word, and he's to my mind, a kind of spirit of the people. I spoke at Fort Sill, 2 or 3 years ago. I was, this is true irony. Think of this. I spoke at Fort Sill. I was invited to speak to the Officers Club at Fort Sill. I was driven in along Setangya Road, Sitting Bull Road. And as I was being ushered into the courtyard where there was a cocktail reception, I glanced into one of the corridors, and there was a portrait of George Armstrong Custer. And I can't tell you what an amazing moment that was in my life. I thought, what am I doing here? Why did they invite me to come and speak here? When the Kiowas were routed in Palo Duro Canyon. They were herded into Fort Sill and imprisoned in the old stone corral, which still stands there. You know, this great stone corral. It's part of the museum complex at Fort Sill. And I think my grandmother might have been there. I don't know this for a fact, but I suppose she was. And the horses, the Kiowa horses, were slaughtered outside the corral, and within hearing, 800 horses were killed. And the Kiowas heard, you know, that. And I wrote this poem called Fort Sill, dedicated to Setaingia. You were riding in a wagon to the train. A tree took shape in the distance. You began to sing. It was more than unseemly. The words of your song were so powerful that nothing less than death could contain them. At times, many years later, I hear the song, not as it was, but as it sounds across time. Oh, my warrior, I love you to sing. The rattle of your breath rising to the sun, I hear among the screams of the hunting horses. I'm going to stop with that, and I'm going to thank you for listening, and I want to wish you very well.